З 7 по 10 жовтня у Львові відбудеться 18-й екуменічний соціальний тиждень «Розвиток сталих інституцій в часи війни, цінності, самозарадність та партнерство».
Форум відбувається з ініціативи Інституту екуменічних студій Українського католицького університету у співпраці із фондом Конрада Аденауера в Україні та Євангелічною церквою Німеччини.
Роль інституцій в часі війни, досягнення соціальної згуртованості та прогресу в часи кризи та невизначеності, свідчення стійкості державних, освітніх, релігійних, культурних і громадських інституцій. Ці та інші питання обговорять експерти з України та за кордону.
В рамках міжнародного форуму відбудуться круглі столи, панельні дискусії, семінари, виставки, майстер-класи. Запрошуємо молодь, активних громадян, студентів, освітян, журналістів, представників релігійних та громадських організацій до участі.
Реєстрація та деталі на сайті es.uku.edu.ua. Форум відбудеться у гібридному форматі – наживо та онлайн.
Glory to Jesus Christ. Dear participants of the 18th Ecumenical Social Week, we are going to start this session with a prayer for those who have fallen due to the Russian aggression, defending our people, and also the prayer for all those who are defending our freedom, who make it possible for all of us to be present here, our Father. In the name of our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Please take your seats. So we are starting this forum, and our forum will be in Ukrainian and in English. We will also have simultaneous interpretation available. We have a feature of simultaneous interpretation. Please select the preferred language. My name is Roman Fijas. I am the director on the Institute of Ecumenical Studies. I sincerely welcome you, dear participants of the 18th Ecumenical Social Week. We will focus on developing sustainable institutions in times of war, value, self-reliance, and partnership. The event is taking place from the 7th to the 10th of October in the premises of the Ukrainian Catholic University Philosophy and Theology faculty. We work in a hybrid format, offline and online. We will also have an event at the Polytechnic University. This event is organized by the Institute of Ecumenical Studies of the Ukrainian Catholic University in partnership with the Ukrainian Catholic University, supported by Konrad Adenauer Foundation and the Protestant Church in Germany, as well as with very active participation of numerous partners and friends who are present here today, coming from all regions of the country. As a visual symbol of this year's, the Ecumenical Social Week has the image of Ukraine depicted as a single mechanism, the operation of which is ensured by interconnected wheels or gears, just as it is in a clockwork mechanism where the wheels transmit movement from the energy to the hands, ensuring the accuracy of time. The same way in Ukraine, we have an internal mechanism which is shaped by different communities. Each of them is an integral part of the system that transmits vital energy, maintains the balance and stability of the entire social organism. If one of these cogs stops working, it affects the functioning of the entire mechanism. And the same is true for societies. When a certain society or community is weak and isolated, it creates an imbalance that the entire country feels Therefore, the strength of Ukraine lies in the interaction of communities and the harmony of movement, which ensures unity, stability, and common progress even in times of trial. We are holding the forum in a difficult time, in times of the war, when even Lviv is repeatedly under attacks. Despite everything, we have come together to reflect on the experience of confronting violence and death, to support each other in the joint search for a path to a just peace. Last year, when we had the 17th Ecumenical Social Week, we dedicated our attention to the theme of the resilience of communities that in times of war became centers of solidarity and mutual support. This year, we will focus on the institutional formula stability of the public, church, cultural, educational, state institutions, both in Ukraine and overseas. A formula that should not only preserve them, but also ensure the development of these communities even in times of challenges and crises. We all feel a crisis of trust into international institutions. We see the growing influence of propaganda and populism, the gradual erosion of democratic values. That is why it is important to talk about communities and institutions as places of meeting, search for truth, responsibility, and partnership. Institutions capable of being drivers of restoring trust, fostering unity, and human dignity. At this forum, within the framework of intersectoral and interdisciplinary discussions, we will develop ideas and practical proposals that will help outline current challenges for public, educational, state, and church institutions, as well as tools for free forums, self reliance, and partnership mechanisms which could be really useful in times of war and trial. At the same time, we will talk about the values that form the foundation of sustainable development, openness, and dialogue. So, today we will have two key parts. The first part includes welcoming remarks from the organizers and main partners of the forum. And the second part is an opening of the international panel, developing sustainable institutions in times of war, values, self reliance, and partnership. So I would like to invite the rector of the Ukrainian Catholic University, Dr. Taras Dobko, to take the floor. I would like to express gratitude, Dr. Dobko, to you. It is thanks to you, thanks to the support of the UCU. We really feel that this forum, the forum dedicated to the discussion of ecumenical matters, found a very good and reliable home where we can generate our ideas. Over to you now. Thank you, Father Roman. Glory to Jesus Christ. Good afternoon, dear friends, dear participants of the forum. First and foremost, I would like to welcome sincerely all of you. Happy to welcome you at the 18th Ecumenical Social Week, the international forum dedicated to the topic of the development of the sustainable institutions in times of war. To be honest, looking back, we understand that the social week has become an institution, and as based on this experience, we can already have a certain case which could be shared because we've been gathering people for 18 years already, which is quite an accomplishment. And also to witness what is the difference that we make. I also would like to express gratitude to the co-organizers, the Institute for Ecumenical Studies, Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Ukraine, Academ, as well as our numerous long-term partners. There are so many of them. You can find all of them in the agenda of this event. You know that because of the war, we Ukrainians became experts in survival, or maybe we are experts in resilience. We learned how to be resilient people. We learn how to be resilient in our institutions, in our communities, how to have resilient democracy. Here at the UCU, we are learning what it means to be a reliable university. You know that very many Ukrainians are active volunteers. They dedicate a lot of time, energy, money. All of that goes to the army. We feel our agency and our responsibility. That's why we definitely know that we cannot stand aside. And we are also know how important it is to commemorate those who have fallen. We also are mindful of the importance of memorialization of those who perished in this war. Of course, there are also some challenges that we are struggling. There are very many people who are leaving the country because of all the suffering. We also have a high rate of divorces in our society, and there are so many families which split apart, especially to speak about the military families. The importance of the family life is under question right now. There are other challenges as well. However, at the same time, I think that we know how to withstand all those challenges, we as Ukrainians, because even without being aware of that, we stick to the principles of Christian social teaching, solidarity, dignity, agency, common good. And I think that it's really important for us to understand how these principles and these approaches could become part of our institutions and the way we operate. It's important for us to preserve what is good, our principles, our self reliance, our openness to cooperation, and not just to keep all of that, but to transform the culture of this social interaction into the policies of social agreements in institutions, especially when we understand that there are different motives in modern policy, and the world order that we were used to is being destroyed. Putin did not destabilize the world order. I think that in the direct sense of the word, he managed to demoralize the world policy. And now we see that the rule of violence is over the rule of law. We have cynicism, nihilism, and very often we say realism and pragmatism as euphemisms, which are used instead of the first terms. And it seems that what matters is just power and accumulation of this power. And we know, especially in this part of the world, we can really feel it, what could be the implications of these ambitions. So, how to create self reliant institutions in times of war. So, not to make up anything, I would like to share to practical points here. I think that you can agree that the war exacerbates our attention and we focus on what really matters. We understand that meaningful work becomes really important. That is why I keep emphasizing that in the Ukrainian Catholic University, there are two most important issues. This is a part of our strategy development and our activities. Firstly, this is what we do for our victory and for future recovery of Ukraine now. And second is what can we do to support people for them to be able to recover and to find strength to continue what they are doing. I strive to have meetings with society for people to focus on senses, to give them hope and some prospects for the future. We have more events when when communities can see each other. This is what gives you the feeling of resilience and belonging. What else is important is long-term type of vision, because on the one hand, in times of turbulence, one really has to respond quickly, and we know that in many aspects, Ukraine is an R&D lab, but you really need to be very fast, quick on the uptake. You have an assumption, you test it, you trial it, you validate it, you change it, and you do not stop. However, with all the quick responses that we have, let's not forget about long term vision. This is what serves for the foundation of resilience and sustainability. This is our sustainability for the future, not how resilient and sustainable we can be now, but also it is about the future. At the Ukrainian Catholic University, we started doing that via policies. We have those things ingrained which will work long term, because when you have the policy, this is what gives you the feeling of sustainability and resilience. This is not just the Veteran Affairs Office that we created, and we have veteran policies shaped. We work not only with the family members in our communities, but we have a family policy at our university that brings you the feeling of resilience, because we focus long term. We also have the program of care for our employees. We have all our initiatives represented in one program, and it is systematically communicated and enforced. And this is not just a number of different steps, this is really part of the university's philosophy. We also have a mental health program. This is a comprehensive initiative. This is not just something that happens only once, but it really facilitates resilience and sustainability. Another example from the academic life: in times of trial, it's really important to think in categories of longitudinal, uh, large scale studies. We had the Forum of Theologists of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and our aim was to shape different long term projects and goals for them to have a transformative impact for the church and society, and to unite around them network teams representing different education institutions from different countries, from different universities. We as Christians need to be mindful of the fact that we can only have sustainable institutions if they bring the idea of hope, when they serve as an example of this hope. When we witness the outbreak of war, His Beatitude Sviatoslav Shevchuk, m- the mayor actually said that from the church we need the word of hope, and it's really important to have this interaction. We see that there are very many challenges, spiritual and moral ones, that we are facing in times of the war. And hope could be become a source of healing and a source of sustainability. Of course, there are some risks to treat ourselves as victims and to feel a lot of hatred and bitterness, to start complaining, to feel that you have been stripped of something and robbed of something. That is why hope is not only about the internal peace of an individual person. This is a precondition for dignified societal relations. This is the foundation for this approach. That is why at our university, when we are contemplating about hope, it's important to speak not only about philosophy and theology, but also about the pedagogy of hope, how to bring people with hope. We speak about psychology of hope, people how people can have this hope back, how to build societies and institutions of hope, about the policy of hope, how to manage people to achieve a common good in the spirit of hope. We Christians live by hope, and hope is not just another emotion for us. This is our way of life, this is our vision, this is part of who we are, this is part of our identity. That is why it's important for us to be people of hope and to create the communities of hope, because those who have hope, they live in a different way. I wish all of you to have a successful forum. Thank you. Thank you, Taras. I also would like to apologize that we didn't have a separate panel about the experience of the Ukrainian Catholic University in terms of development and resilience, because we can see how great our results are. But thank you for having this statement. Now, I would like to invite to the floor the Dean of the Faculty of Philosophy and Theology of the UCU, Father Dr. Yuri Shchurko, because we feel at home not only at the Ukrainian Catholic University, but also in the premises of the Faculty of Philosophy and Theology, chaired by Father Reverend, and he really tries to develop theology not just as a reflection about God and about this experience of learning more about God, but we also have very good approach in terms of the way Christians should behave now in these days.
Glory to Jesus Christ. Reverend Father Taras, Reverend Father Roman, dear sisters and brothers, dear attendees of the forum, I'm happy to welcome you and the walls of the Ukrainian Catholic University, and grateful to everyone who joined us on site here in Lviv, who was not afraid to come to Lviv, especially from abroad. And I would like to also welcome everyone who has joined us online from all over Ukraine and the world. So we are talking about the values, self-reliance, and partnership, and this is not an accidental topic. It was born because of the pain and challenges, but also the hope our people have. So, dear friends, we all understand very well that this war has become a dramatic reminder for us, a reminder that the values are not only important, but they also have a price of a human life, price of freedom, price of dignity. And we have seen from our own experience that when we speak about the choice between good and evil, there's no neutrality. You have to make your choice. The history of the 20th century has already taught humanity this horrible lesson, not to judge. If we don't punish the evil, it doesn't disappear. Miroslav Marinovich repeats it over and over again, and I have learned it from him, and I repeat it everywhere. Some people may say that it's not relevant for this forum, but since we live in times of war, and we ask ourselves, how do we create in the midst of chaos and destruction? I believe that it is relevant because this evil is growing, it's mutating, it's turning and acquiring new forms. After the Second World War, the Nuremberg trial condemned the Nazis and their crimes, but the world has not had any trial over communists and their crimes and the imperialism, which is now taking shape of the Russian aggression. Probably not all good partners of ours in the West realize it today, but it is right now, not some other day. Right now, it is high time we had a new Nuremberg trial, a fair trial over the Putin crimes and the communist legacy. Without this trial, without punishing the perpetrators, without repentance, the peace, stability, and sustainable development would be impossible. We'd be just living in a parallel world, talking about the things which are not efficient. Ukraine is now at the front lines, not only in geographical sense. We are at the front lines of a fight between the civilization and barbarianship, between truth and lies, between the future and the past. And it is of critical importance, and we understand that we cannot prevail on our own. We need partners. We need not only compassion, not only empathy, not only some signs and words of solidarity or concern, as we can all often hear from the diplomatic platforms. We understand that barbarians don't understand this language, so we need effective partnership in defense, partnership in development, partnership in ensuring justice, partnership in creating the institutions which can make sure that the values and rights are enjoyed in this world. The Christians of all denominations, the believers, different religions, people of goodwill from different countries have to realize the level of threat and respond proactively. The history of the 30s of the previous century has shown us what appeasement of the aggressor may lead to. And sometimes it's just simple naivety. Hitler could have been stopped much earlier if the world didn't want to turn a blind eye to the threats. And we cannot repeat that with the Putin's Russia, whose threats and crimes are growing exponentially with every day. this week, we will be discussing how our institutions, educational, church institutions, civil institutions, media, and so on, are enduring the test of war. How do we preserve order in times of chaos? How can we take care of ourselves when the resources are limited? How do we maintain partnership when there are such strong temptations? These are not just theoretical questions. The answers to these questions will define the future of the country, and not only of Ukraine, but also Europe and the world. And I'm saying that without trying to use any big words. So let us spend the next couple of days not only in discussions, but also in search for real solutions. Let us build bridges and create unions, which will become the foundation for fair and just peace. And I wish everyone interesting discussions, good solutions, and a never-ending hope. So let the God help and preserve all of us. Glory to Jesus Christ. When Taras was speaking about hope as the main value, Yuri spoke about active solidarity. So these are already those grains we can pick and then discuss. And now I would like to invite Father Ivan Datsko, who is the president of the Institute of Ecumenical Studies of the Ukrainian Catholic University. He is online. Are you with us, Father Ivan? Glory to Jesus Christ. Yes, I'm joining from Canada. I'm in a new place, and I'm getting used to new conditions, but I'm following very closely everything that is done at our institute. So glory to Jesus Christ. Dear Mr. Rector, Father Dean, and representatives of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and Evangelical Church of Germany. Glory to Jesus Christ. Several years ago, it was almost 20 years ago, so several years after the founding of the Institute of Ecumenical Studies of the Ukrainian Catholic University, knowing about the successful experience of ecumenical social weeks in Western Europe, our institute decided to start this project in Lviv and in other cities of Ukraine. And this successful development of this project is owed to the team of our institute. So I'd like to thank the whole team of the institute and everyone attaching their efforts and also donating money to make sure that these social weeks take place every year. Just as previously, I have already mentioned, and I keep repeating, that the Ecumenical Social Week is an all-Ukrainian social and public forum that seeks to unite the resources of the community, authorities, social organizations, churches, media, and educators around solving current problems of society based on universal human values and the social doctrine of the church, and thereby stimulating ecumenical dialogue in the social sphere. Now, it is even more important when Ukraine is at war. And I can confirm that outside of Ukraine, people are looking at Ukraine with awe and hope. The Ecumenical Social Week in Ukraine belongs to the International Association of European Social Weeks, the Christian Initiative for Europe, and cooperates with a number of institutions in Ukraine and abroad. I will not discuss here the topics we discussed during previous years, but I would like to emphasize that due to my age and the the condition of my health, I had to go back to Canada, but I can now observe and will provide any suggestions on what Ukrainians living outside of Ukraine can do. And I really ask you to focus on this matter. At the session of the Ukrainian Christian Academic Society, UCAS, I suggest to focus our attention on the development of the synodal system in our church. Well, apparently, this is the task for the head of our church and for the bishop, but we also should help with our suggestions, proposals, and initiatives. The Ecumenical Social Week is taking place with the support of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and the Evangelical Church of Germany, and this has been happening for several years in a row. The support is very valuable for us, and it proves the solidarity of your solidarity with Ukraine, the solidarity of our foreign friends, and also proves the fact that our institute is truly ecumenical. And the participation of our Orthodox brothers and sisters prove with their presence and their reports and presentations that this is so. Let us not forget about the prayer, not only communally during the divine liturgy, but also on a personal level, because above all, we need help from the Triune God. It is with these thoughts that we open this 18th Ecumenical Social Week. So may God's blessing rest upon us all, and may the Holy Spirit enlighten our minds and hearts. Thank you very much for your attention. Glory to Jesus Christ. Thank you for staying with us. And throughout these days, we will listen to your experience you have accumulated over the many years of your service.
Words. We sincerely thank you for your personal participation in our event, that you came from Berlin to us, for your trust and for the many years of cooperation that have helped us to generate new ideas and create opportunities to build bridges of understanding and partnerships. We are very grateful to have you here. Please.
So, dear Reverend Dr. Fihas, dear Dr. Taras Dobko, dear Dr. Yuri Shurko, dear Dr. Ivan Dako on the screen, and also Dr. Langpape, who will speak to us in a second. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome on behalf of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. We are a political foundation from Germany. Political means, indeed, we are affiliated with the Christian Democratic Party, with the Christian Democratic family. I would like to thank you all very much for coming here. And I have to correct Reverend Roman Fihas in one regard. I came from Kiev today, not from Berlin. That is important because it's our principle that the way we work, it has two principles. One is that we run our projects from field offices in the country and not from abroad. So I'm based in Kiev, and we have about 100 offices like this all around the world, but currently the one in Ukraine is among the most important we have, where we also execute very many projects compared to others. And the other big principle of our work is the principle of partnership. Everywhere where we work, we try to identify like-minded institutions and like-minded people to work with. And by saying like-minded institutions, I'm already in the very center of the topic of our Ecumenic Social Week this time, because creating and maintaining sustainable institutions, the topic of our week, is really in the very core of our work everywhere in the world, and especially here in Ukraine. And also the partners we are doing this week together are in the very core of our work, Ukrainian Catholic University and the Institute of Ecumenical Studies. This is because, as I said at the beginning, we are part of the Christian democratic family, a political family, a political direction, a political movement that is not a secular movement, that is neutral when it comes to religion, that also expects the state to behave neutral, but positive towards religion. It's not laicism, it is not a faraway neutrality, but is our image of the state is of a state that behaves positive towards religion, towards church, and towards religious institutions, because we think these institutions create the base on which a state, on which a society is functioning. There is a famous saying from one of the most prominent law experts on constitutional law in Germany, and I don't really know how to translate it into proper English. His name is Hans Wolfgang Bockenförde, and he made a statement saying, the state needs a base it cannot create itself, basically. Der Staat lebt von Voraussetzungen, die er selbst nicht schaffen kann. And among these is the engagement and the motivation of citizens, and in many cases based on religious belief. So this is why we work a lot everywhere in the world, and especially here in Ukraine, with church institutions, with different confessions, and being a partner and supporting the Ecumenical Social Week is one of our flagship projects in that regard. We also, since a long time, do support the All Ukrainian Council of Churches. For example, we facilitated some visits of representatives of the different confessions here in Ukraine, for example, to the United States in order to advocate for the Ukrainian cause. And I think church representatives could do that in a very good way. We also support every year the study did by Razumkov Center about religiosity in Ukraine. And I do think this is a very good reference for everybody who does research on religion in this country. So we are very glad to be able to contribute to this week. A week full of not only discussions, but also liturgy. A week also full of exchange and of good conversations between representatives of the different confessions and between representatives of also different countries. We have more people from Germany here, so I'm very happy about this. This is what makes this week a unique event. And also what makes this week a unique event is that it takes place here in Lviv, in the city of Lviv, that is really so full of history, also of church history, and that is, of course, key also to Ukrainian history. And I do not want to mention Lviv without expressing my heartfelt sympathy and condolences to everybody affected by the attacks that happened last weekend. I heard also church was damaged, and I want to express my heartfelt sympathy to everybody who was affected. So now I wish all of us a good week, full of inspiring discussions, full of inspirations, not only intellectually, but also spiritual. And I'm looking very much forward to the many different elements of that week to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas Billinger, for the active support of the Ecumenical Social Week. And what I grab from your speech is that with accept of values such as hope, such as active solidarity, we could add also like a value of staying together, staying close to each other, and even value of friendship, which creates after many years of staying together and having deep conversation. Thank you very much. To our next greeting word, I ask Dr. Wolfram Langpape. He is Chief Church Counselor in the Office for Orthodoxy and Ecumenism in the Protestant Church in Germany. In the ECADE, solidarity is not an empty word. Through their support and active presence, they express a sincere desire to share in our struggle for freedom and in this pursuit of a just peace in Ukraine. Dr. Langpape, the floor is yours.
Glory to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
Your Eminences and Excellencies, dear sisters and brothers, thank you for inviting me to deliver this opening address at this year's Ecumenical Social Week, which focuses on the sustainability of institutions in times of war. The program brings together the voices of religious institutions, of experts in politics and civil society. As the Protestant Church in Germany, we are delighted to share in this exceptional project and to contribute to the many voices and perspectives of ecumenical partners. The role played by religious institutions in Ukraine, particularly the All-Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Communities during the Revolution of Dignity, demonstrates their capacity to defend human rights and promote freedom and equality. The fact that this Ecumenical Social Week has continued unceased since 2008, despite the start of the war and Russian hybrid warfare, and even the full-scale attack, is proof in itself of the sustainability of the work of these institutions. The Ecumenical Social Week showcases the ability of religious institutions, such as the Ukrainian Catholic University, to bring together the key figures that constitute the foundation of public life, even during periods when nearly every facet of public life is under the threat from the aggressor. Religion has played a significant role in the resilience Ukrainians have showed in coping with the senseless brutality Ukraine is facing. Religious institutions can demonstrate their positive influence when free to act without exploitation or instrumentalization by other actors. Therefore, they also act as a monitor of freedom within society. And this has been proven time and time again. Ukraine can rely on its religious institutions to withstand the horrors of war. What has been achieved in the past, what is being achieved right now, and what I'm sure will be achieved in the future is impressive. Thank you for allowing us to be a guest and partners in this great work. And my blessings to this conference and all participants. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Langpape. До нашого завершального заключного слова запрошую пана Андрія Закалюка, який є директором Департаменту освіти та культури Львівської міської ради. Дякую, що Львів є дуже гостинний для наших соціальних тижнів. Були такі тижні, коли ми мали зустрічі в Львівській міській раді. Думаю, ще до цього колись повернемось.
Шановний пане ректоре,
Dear Rector, dear participants of the forum, on behalf of the Lviv City Mayor, we are delighted to welcome you and to congratulate you on the start of the Ecumenical Social Week. It's important to speak about institutions these days, and it is one of the prerequisites for successful democratic states. As all of us know, Ukraine is definitely one of those countries which, in terms of human potential, has quite a stance in the world. But we know that we're a little bit lagging behind if we speak about institutions, and probably this is a challenge that we need to address. That is why my best wishes to all of you. I wish you fruitful work. There's very nice word that I can see here in the name, well, self-reliance. And I decided, you know, actually in the morning, I really felt what it feels to be reliant, self-reliant. In the morning, I needed to help my son to get ready for the kindergarten, who is 4. And you know what I had to demonstrate was to be really patient, because you know that it's much quicker for me to help him rather than wait for him, for all this time to pass for him to get dressed. But I actually saw this self-reliance demonstrated by myself. This is a very small practical example, and maybe this is something that we are lacking these days in partial, if to speak about younger generations. And I don't want to be critical, but still we need patience. Sometimes we really want to see results very quickly. We really want to see it here and now. We are very fast when it comes to the result. This is a good thing to want something, have our self-reliance without patience is not something that one can expect. That is why we really need to know how to shape it. There are some things that need a lot of effort, systemic approach, and only after that we can expect some long-term outcomes. And institutions are a very good example of that. Shaping formation of institutions is a lengthy process. It takes time, and sometimes you really want to see fast results, but we do not see them because if we are trying to be too fast, sometimes we can get very hesitant whether we'll manage, whether we will succeed. And sometimes there could be even more uh, doubts that we have because that could be imposed by our enemies. They really try, to disseminate this self-doubt among us. That is why I wish all of you, I wish also to make sure that that you will really be successful, and this is the right journey that you are embarking on. Thank you for these words of yours and the force value that you mentioned, patience. Yes, because whenever we speak about hope, active solidarity, and friendship, it's important to speak about patience. So we are over with welcoming words. So now it's time for us to work. This is the international panel that we are starting development of sustainable institutions in times of war, values, self-reliance, and partnership. That will be actually the core of everything we will be discussing during these days. And I would like to invite the moderator, Oksana Kulakovska, the director of the Kyiv Center of the Ukrainian Catholic University. Oksana, the floor is yours. And then we will see our speakers joining. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. Yes. Glory to Jesus Christ. Reverend Roman, everyone who is present here, the rector, brothers and sisters, holy fathers. This is not going to be a very difficult job that I have, because basically the topic of this panel echoes the topic of the conference. We had already a very good introduction, and that means that we can directly focus on the topic of this panel. And I would like to invite everyone to join this conversation, as this is going to be a conversation. We will communicate, we will discuss the topic with our speakers, with our participants of the Ecumenical Social Week, trying to, as the Dean of the Faculty of Philosophy and Theology has already set this bar really high, that it's not only about asking questions, we will also strive for finding answers. I don't know how possible it is, because the complexity of the questions is something that is not really easy to address even within the entire Ecumenical Social Week. But we will make an attempt. We will try and think how to maintain a balance between actually the sustainability of institutions and flexibility of the institutions, about their capacity of being responsive in regard to newly emerging challenges that we see. We will think and discuss why it is important to discuss the sustainability of institutions in times of war. We will also focus on challenges which are democratic institutions facing right now, and we will also have international guests joining us. Also, long term, what does it mean for us? And actually, have to make sure that we stay focused and that we think about the future, when on a daily basis we need to address so many everyday routine problems and issues, and they seem to be growing and mounting with each day. We will also focus on what shapes the core of the institutional sustainability. Another topic for discussion is the experience of Ukraine, which is of critical importance not only for us. However, it's also important to understand, to conceptualize it, but also it is about us sharing this experience globally from the perspective of sustainability and resilience of institutions. And another one would be the role of us as universities, as the representatives of academia, for us to contribute to sustainability and development of institutions. And yes, I've been talking so much already, and I mentioned that we already had the introduction. So yes, it's my pleasure to invite Professor Miroslav Maranovic, Thomas Beeringer. Please join us, join this panel. And we also, um, Dr. Miriam Bicker was supposed to join us from the Netherlands, and David Stulik. However, unfortunately, David Stulik couldn't make it, and he's not going to join us online. However, we know how important his experience is for this discussion and for this subject matter that we have under discussion, understanding the importance of the participation of Dr. Stulik. He has the video recording of his speech, where he would like to focus on what is the most important for the discussion that we are going to have now, to outline the framework for this discussion of sustainability of institutions. So maybe we will start from this video, and then I will invite all those who are present here on site. So I would like now to introduce David Stulik, Special Representative of the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Eastern Partnership. He is a senior analyst and advisor in the Czech Analytics Center, the Center for Values. For 12 years, David worked as a press secretary and information officer in the EU office to Ukraine, and that means he is well versed into the Ukrainian context. That is why I think that this is going to be a very good introduction for the international panel that we are about to start. First of all, I would like to send my greetings to all the participants of the forum. I also would like to express gratitude for the invitation. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, and I really wanted to join you online because you know that, well, you are also witnessing very turbulent times in the Czech Republic. However, I would like to focus my attention on the following. For quite a long period of time, I lived in Ukraine. I am also working on Ukraine now. I participate in joint trainings of the Czech and Ukrainian armed forces. And that means that I have very many reflections about unique Ukrainian traits and features that the entire world has to be interested in, and it's important for the world to study this experience and to analyze lessons learned. First and foremost, you Ukrainians, the Ukrainian people, Ukrainian communities, and Ukrainian society, Ukrainian civil society has a unique self organization capacity. Because when we didn't have the state before, or actually we had quite a corrupt state, and you did not want to identify with that, you managed to create some institutions, and you did it from scratch without any guidance from above. That means that you are so capable in critical times to self organize and to fight back. I think that this is one of the key reasons why Russia did not succeed in destroying you and capturing you. That means that the world should really learn from you on the basis of your experience. After the outbreak of war, I also noticed that the taxes that businesses were paying, or you have higher taxes, though we know that economic potential was lower in Ukraine before. That means that people started paying taxes, that people are actually supporting different military units as volunteers. And at some point, I don't know whether you paid attention to that, but Ukrainians became mindful of the fact that the state is them, that this is not a political class of any kind, some members of parliament who were appointed, some politicians, but the state are citizens. And this is the principle of democratic society. When democratic society assumes this responsibility for the state, for their country, I guess that that is something that we in Europe do not see often. That is why in times of crisis, we are not so capable to self organize as compared to what you are capable of. There are many people coming to Ukraine, visiting Ukraine from different places, not only to fight in Ukraine, but just to stand by you. I have many friends who live in the cities of Kyiv, Kharkiv, Slavyansk, even in Kramatorsk. As these people understand that the real fight is for human mankind. This is the fight for different values that we are upholding, and unfortunately, it's taking place in the territory of Ukraine. Russia really wants to destroy it. Russia doesn't want to destroy only Ukraine. Russia wants to destroy the entire Western world, which really upholds these humanitarian democratic values. It wants to destroy democracies, and I understand that it's about the everyday losses that you suffer from. We look at you with a lot of hope, and it's not only about hope. Very many of us who are helping, this is not about only official sources through governmental assistance and aid, but also we have civil society level of support delivered to Ukraine. That is why our role and our task is to learn as much as possible from your experience, to analyze the lessons learned, and to draw certain conclusions. And I also think that in the long term, uh, Ukraine will definitely prevail, because these ideas, principles, values that Russia is supporting, as well as other totalitarian states, they are not eternal. They cannot last forever. And we understand that it will end at some point. That is why I believe that this great beginning of the changes in Europe, understanding of human values, democratic values, all these great humanitarian traits, they get a second life in Ukraine. And I understand that you suffer immense losses, but I know that Europe will be looking up to you. For us, the cooperation that we have as Ukraine is really the cooperation about us learning a lot from Ukraine, but you will also impact the destiny of this continent. That is why, from the Czech Republic, from Prague, I want to send you best greetings, lots of energy. Make sure that we think about you, that we think about your men, your women, those who are on the front lines and those who are in the rear. This human solidarity with you and your solidarity with us will put an end to this evil. That is why I extend my gratitude to all of you. And I hope that next time there will be an opportunity for us to meet on site, to meet each other. And I hope that it happens shortly. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
We are also very grateful to you. Unfortunately, we cannot do it in person, but I can say that David is a great friend and ambassador of Ukraine in the world, and he does a lot to make sure that this voice is heard, especially in those international institutes and institutions which can impact global decisions. And we continue our discussion. And I think that we will work in the following format. I will invite our speakers to make some introductory remarks, and then we will return to the questions we decided to discuss. So after the introductory words by David, there are some moments which he stressed and which bring us back to the question of why it is important to speak about the institutions if the state is us, the citizens. We'll return to this question later. And meanwhile, I would like to give the floor to Professor Miroslav Marinovich. And I think that in these reflections, we may expect to have an answer to the question of what is the basis of strong and capable institutions, what makes them effective at such time. Since Miroslav joined the establishment and development of the Institute, we have the honor of being present at right now, since Miroslav Marinovich is the advisor of the rector of the UCU and the president of the UCU Institute of Church History. And until 2024, he spent 23 years as the vice rector of the UCU, and starting from 2008, he was a vice rector for the matters of mission and of the UCU. He's a member of the Ukrainian Helsinki group, and also the organizers of the group of the 1st December. So, Miroslav, the floor is yours. Thank you. What is the format? Can you hear me like that? Glory to Jesus Christ. Highly esteemed guests, my task, the one I set for myself, was to look from the above and to analyze from a bird's eye perspective what are the transformations and the mechanisms of ecumenical cooperation. And I called my speech "A Crisis is Always an Opportunity." And then I changed the title to "A Crisis is Also an Opportunity." So you understand that I have changed the modality a little bit because it may happen, but it doesn't have to. It depends on us whether we will see this chance and whether we will use this chance. So we are witnessing a rapid avalanche-like transformation of the world, or rather, we are not just observing it, we are inside that world arc, which is being tossed around by those turbulent waves of change. Today, cracks have appeared in all the institutions and mechanisms on which the security structure of the world was relying, and I mean the structure of the world which developed after the Second World War. The network of ecumenical contacts was part of the structure, and cracks have appeared in it as well. Moreover, the military allowed of Vladimir Putin and Patriarch Kirill caught the Christian ecumenism by surprise. Well, these radical changes in the previous ecumenical paradigms was something that no one was ready for. All the mentioned changes were and are too fleeting for people to have time to adapt to them. And therefore, the first emotion was nostalgia for the familiarity of the paradise lost. And the first action was an attempt to go back to it. In politics, this is a golden time for all populists who promise to return everything familiar and understandable, and most importantly, to achieve this through simple and radical measures. There have been such attempts in the field of ecumenism as well. There was a temptation to find individual culprits, such as Vladimir Putin or Patriarch Kirill, and to lay all responsibility on them, but to leave the current architecture of interchurch relations intact. I think that even today, many ecumenists dream of a time when it will be possible to replace Kirill with a conditional Hilarion and happily return to business as usual. According to the testimony of Ukrainian theologian Serhiy Shumilo, Metropolitan of the Orthodox Church of Constantinople Ambrose Zograf admitted that the majority of Orthodox churches and hierarchs prefer to remain silent about Russia's criminal war against Ukraine. And this is also evidence of the current crisis in Orthodoxy. That's the end of the quote. To preserve the remnants of the recent ecumenical contacts with the Russian Orthodox Church was something that Pope Francis was trying to do, may he rest in peace. And it seems that only the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Rowan Williams, in April 22, that's 2022, when it became clear that the Russian Orthodox Church had blessed the full-scale aggression against Ukraine, it spoke out most boldly. And I quote, "There are good reasons for excluding the Russian Orthodox Church from the World Council of Churches. The law on sedition needs to be read. When the church actively supports aggressive war without condemning obvious violations of any ethical conduct in wartime, the other churches have the right to raise this issue." End quote. However, as was not difficult to predict, this proposal met a resistance from those who spoke about the importance of preserving the channel of influence on the Russian Orthodox Church. This is the exact equivalent of the purely political version of the need to preserve the channels of interstate communication. But knowing about this position of the Western world, both the Kremlin and Patriarch Kirill invariably abuse it, simply enjoying their influence and escalating their demands. So, my first and very confident conclusion is this: the main task of our time should not be to restore the previous world order, but to build a new one on a different basis. And this applies to both geopolitics and the ecumenical world order. The humanitarian catastrophe caused by this war is so horrific that it forces the Christian world to wonder how such heinous war crimes were even possible in our supposedly Christian civilization, and to look closely at all the parameters of the previous status quo to realize where mistakes were made. And above all, the Christian world must take seriously the doctrine that has become the ideological and motivational platform for the planned revival of the Russian Empire, and namely the doctrine of the Russian world. It should be perceived not as a legitimate doctrine of the Russian Church and not as the spiritual position of the Russian people, but as a heretical doctrine that is pagan in its nature and quasi-Nazi in its ideological orientation. Tolerating such a doctrine in the Christian world should be shameful and unacceptable. The modern challenges facing that humanity is facing have no denominational affiliation. They have arisen before the human race as such. This also applies to the ecumenical movement. After all, the threat to the Christian world posed by the doctrine of the Russian world is so great that the Christian ecumenical community should have succeeded in reaching a common decision, the precedent of which is in the history of Christianity was the conciliar condemnation of the heresies of Arianism, Nestorianism, or iconoclasm. And it seems to me I've been repeating this idea for about 2 years. However, as of the end of 2023, only one statement of Orthodox theologians of the world dated March 13, 2022 has been published, which currently has 342 signatures. Well, maybe the figure is already different. However, it also contains an extremely important verdict, and I quote, "The false doctrine of ethnophilitism is the basis of the ideology of the Russian world. If such false principles are considered valid, then the Orthodox Church ceases to be the Church of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Apostles, the Nicene Constantinople Creed, the Ecumenical Councils, and the Fathers of the Church. Unity becomes essentially impossible." End of the quote. So can we seriously talk about ecumenism with the Russian Orthodox Church? I think no one in the Christian community doubts that both political and ecumenical institutions and mechanisms grow out of values and are based on them. And therefore, if these institutions and mechanisms experience a crisis, we should look at what is happening to their value platform. One of the fundamental values is truth. And it was with the truth that there have been problems. Western participants in the previous ecumenical dialogue sacredly adhered to the formula dialogue at any cost. And after World War II, the main partner of the Western churches in the Christian East was the Russian Orthodox Church. And therefore, the entire ecumenical dialogue became Moscow-centric. Accordingly, everything that complicated this dialogue became undesirable and potentially dangerous for them. And it was with this in mind that one should understand the numerous cases of marginalization of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church or the Orthodox churches which have not been recognized by Moscow in Ukraine, which in the eyes of Western ecumenists were too often the troublemakers. Western churches, of course, saw all the negative features of the Kremlin Church. But there was an illusion, I have to apologize for this paraphrase, that the hunchback could be corrected. This is a Ukrainian proverb. If the principle Wandel principle through Handel, like changing through trade, can be applied, then in the ecumenical sphere, its unspoken counterpart could be called Wandel durch Dialog, like change through dialogue. In general, this style is absolutely legitimate when it comes to a win-win civilization. That is a community of those states, peoples, and churches that seek to find understanding and establish peace. In such a culture, cooperation is a mandatory prerequisite. However, neither for Putin nor for his church alter ego Cyril, understanding is not the goal. They play by the zero-sum principle. That is, they seek not only the destruction of the Ukrainian state, but also the humiliation and subjugation of the entire democratic world, which they have declared to be the incarnation of the devil on earth. And in this case, dialogue at any cost is perceived by the Russian leadership as weakness and provokes it to act on the principle of aggression without any restrictions. So both the first and the second models of change through cooperation have, in my opinion, suffered a complete defeat, both in the case of Vladimir Putin and in the case of Patriarch Cyril. So my conviction is that the mistake of the previous decades was that the Western churches, striving to take into account the interest of their opponent, which is a good thing to do, they started to submit to him and moving together with him. And from this, the dialogue of love was losing its deep meaning, and sometimes it seemed that it was acting more like a quasi-Christian screen behind which there was purely political logic of bowing to force. However, what was sometimes appropriate in the political interblock confrontation became destructive for the Christian nature of ecumenism. And therefore, it is time to rethink the entire concept of ecumenical dialogue, and above all, to agree on the principles on which this dialogue should take place and what values it is called to protect. And here, fidelity to the truth should come first, because without the truth, there is no dialogue. True dialogue is possible only in the truth, for the sake of the truth, and not at the expense of the truth. If the dialogue hides the truth, then the dialogue itself becomes empty. True reconciliation is possible only in the truth. And the community of those churches that share the declared values should also self-organize. And accordingly, those churches that violate the aforementioned values in the practice of their activities should find themselves outside of this community. So, in conclusion, I will say this. The world will not withstand the current pressures if it continues to rely on a mixture of despised values and weathered beliefs. Jesus spoke the truth, but not politically correctly. Therefore, if we Christians want to renew ecumenical institutions and mechanisms, we must boldly and uncompromisingly verify whether they correspond to the values declared. And by the way, the fundamental Christian value is love. You have to love Russians as well. And the whole world in the West wants to love Russians. And it seems to me it is precisely this reluctance to change this attitude to one of hatred that prevents many Western Christians from finding an adequate response to the sin of Putin's Russia. In particular, and here I would like to quote an open letter to the Senate and Rectorate of the Catholic University dated March 23, 2022. I quote, "If the Christian world wants Russian Orthodoxy to recover morally and give the world the deep treasures of true faith and its tradition, it must realize this will not happen if the hierarchy and the faithful of this church do not go through moral repentance. Ecumenists of the world must recognize that the parallels between the ideology of the Russian world and the Nazi ideology have become completely justified today. And therefore, the Russian Orthodox Church, which has also become the Reich Church, must bear its shame just as the German Evangelical Church once bore it. After all, God's peace is always the fruit of renunciation of evil and union with God. End of quote. And it is this renewed connection with God that each time opens up a new and optimistic chances for humanity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for such a deep reflections on the topic and for such a great frame, which is really important in terms of posing new questions, in terms of your statements, which are very relatable to the topic, because you have the Institute of Church taken at the model, and then you have different layers of challenges as represented through their temporal perspective. This is what we can see in political institutions, in academical institutions, diplomatic institutions, because as you mentioned, very often it's about negotiations and trade. These are the tenders that we see thanks to these processes. But in some institutions, we know that it's possible to have a change through dialogue. It is possible, despite all of evident and obvious precautions. However, I would like to invite to the floor Thomas Bieringer, who is the head of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Ukraine. For 4 years, he also was representing the Department of Consultancy. Also, he worked in he represented the Office for North Africa, offices for the Gulf states and Palestinian territories. Also, it's about the European Economic Policy Department, working in Thüringer in the state service and consulting in the Association for the German Banks in Berlin. I decided to share more information about your experience because your optics and your perspective is very important for us, because the foundation that you have been working for a lot is a great investor in strengthening capacity of Ukrainian institutions as well as the Ukrainian Catholic University. And I would like to express my personal gratitude for your support. In your opinion, what is important now when we speak about resilience of institutions, challenges for the institutions, and also the meaning long term for these institutions to remain capable?
For the invitation and for your kind introduction. Can everybody hear me? Is the microphone working? Yeah, I have this equipment here. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction. You mentioned that I am have been serving in many different countries, but I still feel new to Ukraine after 1.5 years. So I'm a bit reluctant to talk about Ukrainian institutions that much because I'm still new to the country now. I'm talking to Ukrainians, so this is a bit difficult for me. I will try, but maybe let me briefly give you an introduction in my assessment of the title of the of the panel because it's about creating sustainable institutions in times of war. And the subtitle is Values, Self-Reliance and Partnership. And this is, of course, something I would like to say a few words about values. Start with values. I will say something about self-reliance and also about partnership, if I may. And I will reflect Ukrainian institutions and my opinion on the resilience of these institutions. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, I represent a political foundation from the Christian democratic family. So I'm now in the values part. And Christian democracy in Germany came into existence as a movement trying to overcome confessional divide. Before the Second World War, we had like a Catholic party in the political field, and we had other parties that were like more attractive to Protestants. After the Second World War, the idea of a union came, and this is how Christian democracy as a movement came into existence, and this is why the party we are affiliated with, party of the current Chancellor Friedrich Merz, is called the Christian Democratic Union. Union is an important terminology here. And in the core of Christian democracy is a certain view of mankind, which is based on Christian values, which means the individual human being as a creature of God, and this differentiates us from liberalism. The individual human being as a creature of God is in the core of our political worldview. The individual and not the collective. This is the big difference between Christian democracy and socialism. And what we derive from this is a principle called the principle of subsidiarity, meaning everything should be dealt with at the lowest possible level, the level that is the closest to the individual people. And this can be applied in very many different ways to political institutions. It is a principle that focuses very much, for example, on local self-governance. I don't like the term decentralization for that, because also decentralization means top-down. But what we think is that not only all politics is local, but local politics is the foundation, is the very center of politics. So everything should be done at the lowest possible level, the most local level possible. But that principle of subsidiarity can also be applied to the relation between the state and the citizen. So everything you don't need the state for should be dealt with by the citizens themselves as a social creature. And again, this as a social creature distincts us from liberalism. So what Christian democracy thinks is very important is institutions, not only state institutions. We are talking about institutions here. So institutions like the church, institutions like associations, trade unions, NGOs, semi-state, the private sector, semi-state organizations. And I heard I was told there's a business school here in Ukrainian Catholic University. It was a very interesting topic. So also the private sector is part of these institutions and affected by the principle of subsidiarity. So this is, I think, a principle. It is always a principle that is always in danger. I'm an economist by training, and in our discipline, there is, when it comes to political economy, there is a certain law. It's called the attractiveness of the biggest budget. The actor with the biggest budget always tries to centralize things, always try to grab grab power, to grab responsibility. So it is a principle that is always in danger and that always needs to be defended. And I think there are some reasons to look at Ukraine as an example for that at the moment. Of course, there is a conflict of interests always in a situation where a country is at war. Wartime requires, in many cases, a top-down decision-making process. That is in a natural conflict with the subsidiarity principle. And in a wartime society, it's especially hard to maintain this principle of subsidiarity. On the other hand, the country is on its way to Europe. And this way to Europe is what you are fighting for. And this is why I think this balance is needed, to keep the balance between the subsidiarity principle and the centralization of power that is required by the war, also to bring the country into a good position after the war is over, to continue in a good way. But not only in wartime countries, this principle is in danger. I mentioned Germany. We have a deep crisis currently in our federal system, where it becomes more and more bureaucratic and difficult to manage, because in the time since our constitution was established in 1949, the balance between the federal states and the central states has been shifted toward the central states a lot, and that makes our system difficult as well. And it's also true for the EU. The European Union, not least because of the fact that it were Christian Democrats who were in the core of the founding, were the founding fathers of the European Union. Robert Schuman, Konrad Adenauer, Alcide de Gasperi, they were all Christian Democrats. And since then, the principle of subsidiarity is also very important for the constitution of the EU. And we have it in Article 5 of the European Union Treaty, that the European Union is based on this principle of subsidiarity. But also here, you hear a lot of criticism that the EU not always respects this principle. So this is about values and the principle of subsidiarity. And I think for Ukraine, it's important to keep that balance. If we look at self-reliance and look at Ukraine and on the situation of Ukrainian politics and Ukrainian democracy you were asking for, I found a recent quote of somebody who is very familiar in this place and in this university, Jaroslav Hricak, the historian. He was quoted in The Economist 2 weeks ago, actually, by saying, Ukraine has been, I quote, Ukraine has been a democracy more by default than by institutional design. Its liberties grounded not on independent courts or on parliament, but in the pragmatism of power groups, in the diversity of its regions, and in the weakness of the central state, and first and foremost, in the ability of the people to come together in times of crisis, unquote, as we can see now. So maybe I think this analysis is very true. And it's especially the ability of people to come together in times of crisis is very important and good now and in wartime, but maybe it's not enough at peacetime. After the war is over, I think it's very important that Ukraine develops very self-reliant, very strong institutions that can safeguard democracy and rule of law after the war is over for the future. Because I'm pretty sure, even if there is some kind of a ceasefire or peace agreement, however it might look and whenever it might come, of course, Russia will not stop on Ukraine. It will continue to try to subjugate Ukraine, but from the inside, by weakening the country, by trying to create chaos, and only strong institutions can make the country stable against this attempt. And that gets, of course, very obvious when now everybody is talking about elections, what will come after the war, but it's not only about elections. In a rule of law-based democracy, the rule of law comes before elections, comes even above democracy, meaning that even in a democracy, the winner of elections cannot do whatever he wants. He has to respect rule of law, even if a majority voted in favor of him. It's not a winner takes it all situation in a democracy, and this is why we as Christian Democrats and we as Konrad Adenauer Stiftung promote the concept of a representative democracy that is based on rule of law. And for this, you do not only need elections. Elections are just the tip. This is why we are advocating political parties as strong institutions, institutionalized political parties that are more than just a group of followers of a certain person. We promote political party groups in parliament that needs to be institutionalized. Local political parties with local chapters, with women's and youth organizations, but also all the institutions I mentioned before, you need below the political sphere, like trade unions, business associations, churches, and other societies. And all of them should be independent and not work as state organizations. Only if you have all this huge set of institutions, you can achieve a workable and stable democracy. It's not just about elections, it's a whole set of institutions a country needs to be self-reliant and sustainable as a democracy. And I see many issues in Ukraine currently the country has to deal with after the war, and with a view on future elections and the stability of the political systems. Maybe we can discuss some of them later in the discussions. Partnership, the last of the three subtitles. I think we do still have a huge majority of Ukrainians being in favor of EU accession. And with this in mind, and also in mind the fact that there is a strong tendency of isolationism in the United States that not started with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a symptom of this, not the reason for this. I think the main partners for Ukraine, of course, are the European countries. And I'm happy to represent a German institution here in Ukraine working on this partnership with your country to help to strengthen the institutions I just mentioned according to the principle of subsidiarity. As I said, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung has about 100 field offices around the world. Ukraine is currently among the most important one. We are based here since 30 years. In September, almost 31 years already, and so only a few years after independence, we registered our first office here. And our principles are, as I mentioned, partnership and also sustainability. So we do not try to implement a certain concept or certain projects from our head office top down. We also want to respect the principle of subsidiarity when it comes to our own work. We try to identify like-minded people and institutions wherever we work, so here in Ukraine, and work with them and develop our projects jointly with these institutions, like we do it in the field of ecumenical work and in the field of churches. And we are here to stay. We work in the long run. We invest in people in the long run. So, for example, we do scholarship programs. We did these programs already since a long time, and we are happy to see people grow who are our scholarship holders and stay in contact with them when they might enter politics later. Maybe this as an example for the partnership principle, a principle that is executed also by many other European institutions working in Ukraine, helping the country to continue on its way to EU accession. As I mentioned, EU as such is also, it's a huge institution that is subject to the principle of subsidiarity. It was also growing since the many decades of its existence. It grew to a very high level of integration. And the more it grows in that direction, the harder it becomes for new member countries to join, because they have to accept the so-called acquis communautaire. So the level of integration the EU has already reached, and if that level goes up and up, it becomes more of an effort to join on the existing level. So it's not going to be easy for Ukraine. Many things have to develop in Ukraine, including the government institutions I was just talking about. But there are many institutions here in order to assist Ukraine on that way. And we owe you something, because you are fighting for us as well. You are currently defending all of Europe. And if we count out the Americans, what we probably need to do now, Europe gets more and more aware that by far currently the Ukrainian army is the strongest one fighting for Europe. So not only Ukraine needs us, we need Ukraine very much as well. So we owe you something. We owe you our full support for EU accession. And I think this is the meaning of partnership between Europe and Ukraine at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beringer, for your kind words. And you put the foundation as an example of partnership. And again, let me stress how much we appreciate it most heartedly. But let me also put a question mark with the thesis that we do need institutions in a peacetime, and this people's initiative and solidarity is probably a great power in the wartime. Let me again put a question mark here and add another kind of optics to our discussion, which is a capability. Because in my humble opinion, the role of institutions in a wartime quite often is even more important than in a peacetime, because the capability to respond to existential threat during the war, especially during the long war, because we know all this, the passion of solidarity, the first months of the war, which just saved the country. Let's put it, clear. But in the long run, if institutions do not function, if institutions do not have capability to respond to this kind of a high threat, it puts the existence of the country, under the question. But thank you very much for your remarks. I believe if you want to comment,
I comment quickly on that later.
Okay. Because I believe, я думаю, що вже з нами.
I believe that we already have Miriam Baker with us. She is joining our discussion online. And by the way, in our discussion, I think that we will be focusing not only on Ukrainian institutions, we have a broader framework. We will be talking about the international institutions and their resilience and capabilities. And we will be using this political optics. We mentioned the democratic institutions and their capability to respond to global challenges. And we're very pleased that we have an honor to have Dr. Miriam Baker, a politician, the representative of the Dutch Parliament, party leader of the Christian Union, in the House of Representatives of the Netherlands. And since 2006 to 2013, Dr. Baker was a member of the council in Utrecht, 2015 to 2013 to 2015, the representative of the Christian Union at the House of Representatives. And in 2019, she became the leader of the faction.
Very much.
Please,
Dear
the floor is
friend.
yours. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Dear friends, thank you for the opportunity to join your conference and to speak briefly to you. My name is Mirjam Bikker, and I'm a member of parliament in the Netherlands, and it's an honor to speak to you about Christian politics. I also feel humbled to have the opportunity to speak to you. You and your country are going through a time that is hard for me to truly understand, as I live in a country without war, the daily fear of missile attacks, the immense grief over lives lost, so many people forced to flee. A country that has been utterly devastated, and the barbaric atrocities committed by Russia. Living in a peaceful country, it is impossible for me to fully comprehend what you are experiencing. First and foremost, I want to offer you my heartfelt sympathy, my support, and my prayers. This past spring, I visited Lviv and Rivne. I was deeply moved. When we crossed the border on foot, 2 people from an Ukrainian-aid organization were waiting for us. Together with them, we drove to Lviv. What struck me on the journey was how every village had a cemetery, not only with old graves, but also with the graves of recently fallen soldiers, as marked by the Ukrainian flags placed at their graves. Men from Western Ukraine, in the prime of their lives, fallen in the fight for their country's freedom. At every cemetery, at every village, we saw the same. Flags, flowers, photographs. The cruelties of war were visible everywhere. It's a scene that has stayed with me and a memory that will never fade. I spoke to all kinds of different people. Church leaders, widows, wives of soldiers currently at the front, volunteers. And what deeply touched me were the conversations with mothers. I'm sorry, there's a little noise here in the Netherlands from the police, but now they've moved there. What deeply touched me were the conversations with mothers about their hopes and their dreams for the children. One woman said, "I no longer dare to dream of a safe country, a free country. My children will always grow up under the threat of war." And at the military cemetery in Lviv, I spoke to a mother, and she spoke to me about her son. She was visibly proud of him. She loved him, and her face bore both love and pain, pride and sorrow. And it showed me what war really does to people. It breaks hearts, destroys families, and leaves deep scars, not only on the country, but also on those left behind. And this visit and story underscores and makes it so urgently necessary to keep supporting Ukraine, also from the Netherlands, and we will do this every day, and to pray for peace and a real justice. Me and my party, the Christian Union, will keep supporting Ukraine in its fight for real freedom and a better destiny. Today, I have been invited to speak to you about the influence of Christian values on the rule of law and the legislations that we create. I'm a politician of an explicitly Christian party in the Netherlands. The Dutch parliament has 15 parties represented. 2 of these parties are explicitly Christian, and one another is based on Christian values. In addition, there are several liberal parties, right-wing conservative parties, traditional labor parties, and progressive left-wing parties. So a lot of parties, and one of them, the beautiful one, is the Christian Union. The Christian Union is a party that I'm active for, and it's a Christian party made up of Christians from all of our country who seek to do what is good for the Netherlands through political debate. In our politics, we are guided by a biblical compass, which stems from texts like Micah 6, verse 8. Maybe you know it. In this verse, you can read this. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Serving as politicians with biblical values is our starting point. We see God's word as absolutely fundamental to how we operate in politics. And Jesus calls all of us to seek peace and justice by following him. This quest extends not only to our fellow human beings, but also to society and to politics, where decisions are made on behalf of that society. This is why many Christians are active in politics and why Christian political parties have been formed. It is to a broken world that we are called to bring justice and peace. Pursuing justice requires us to actively work for a dignified human existence for each and everyone belonging to our society. The government has a weighty responsibility too, to strive for justice and to oppose injustice. As guardians of social order and the interests of the community, they are called to protect all that is vulnerable, from people to the environment. When we talk about justice and righteousness and about promoting the good life within the framework of state and government, we also draw naturally from our own tradition. For example, from the work of the well-known church father Augustine of Hippo. Augustine clearly saw that justice is a double-edged sword in the hands of the government. On the one hand, the government must wield this sword to combat injustice, to protect through its power. On the other hand, governmental power itself must also be limited, to protect people against a government that quickly becomes too powerful. For, as Augustine put it, without justice, what is the state but a great band of robbers? The Second World War has shown that the great fear of a state terror, whether through fascist, communist, socialist, or national socialist totalitarianism, is not unfounded. From this fear, the Christian American thinker Reinhold Niebuhr wrote, "The capacity of man for justice makes democracy possible, but his tendency to injustice makes the rule of law necessary." Let me repeat that one more time. The capacity of man for justice makes democracy possible, but man's tendency to injustice makes the rule of law necessary. In fact, this is also an echo of the Apostle Paul and Augustine. The best framework for a workable society in a sinful world is the rule of law. It offers both the individual and the community order as well as freedom. From the recognition of evil follows the necessity of justice. And this entails not only the obligation to combat blatant injustice, but also a positive duty towards social justice, so that everyone can provide for their existence. Besides the protective dimension of the rule of law also has a social dimension that reflects the positive obligation towards justice. This concerns the enabling support from the government to give substance to fundamental rights. In the Dutch context, this includes, for example, the government's responsibility to ensure adequate housing availability. Christian politics is grounded in the Bible, in tradition, and in the insights of many thinkers throughout the centuries. In fact, much of our Western culture itself has been built on this very foundation. Out of this rich tradition, various movements and institutions emerged throughout the last century. Protestant and Catholic political parties were founded, as well as Christian trade unions and social organizations. Each of these rooted in a desire to shape society according to biblical values and a deep sense of moral responsibility. However, due to increasing individualism and secularization, our society is becoming more and more alienated from this shared foundation. The moral and spiritual roots that once nourished our communities are being forgotten or deliberately set aside. And that is not without a consequence. To show why this is such a pressing issue, I want to share a story told by Os Guinness. He used the powerful metaphor of the cut flower society. Imagine a beautiful bouquet of flowers, freshly cut, arranged in a vase. It may look vibrant and alive for a time, but we all know the truth. Without roots, those flowers are already dying. They have been cut loose from the source that once gave them life. Guinness argues that Western society is increasingly like that bouquet, still enjoying the visible beauty of values like human dignity, justice, and freedom, but cut off from the very Judeo-Christian roots that made those values possible in the first place. Detached from faith, from tradition, and the shared moral framework, we risk watching our society slowly wither, even as we admire its fading bloom. For Christian politics, this is a wake-up call. We are not here to defend tradition for its own sake, nor to impose our belief, but to witness to the truth that a just and free society must be rooted in something deeper than the individual will or the passing mood of the majority. We must work to reconnect our culture with the sources of life, faith, community, responsibility, and hope. Let us, here in the Netherlands, not become a cut flower society. Let us instead be gardeners of renewal, tending the soil of our culture and pointing the way back to the living roots that sustain through human flourishing. As I have tried to make clear, the Christian plea for the rule of law is deeply rooted in human dignity. I would like to illustrate how I put this deep belief into practice with an example. Because the rule of law should be rooted in human dignity, this means that the government also has a duty to protect people from violations of their dignity. And sometimes there are injustices that silently scream out to you, while others seem deaf to them. When I had just become a city council member in the city where I studied, I rode my bike past window prostitution. Many Eastern European women, about my age, were working there. while older men drove by around lunchtime. At that moment, it struck me that the city government bore responsibility for these practices and the exploitation of these women. The women were exploited, while the pimps grew rich. Add to the reality of many political parties, where the prevailing belief in the Netherlands is that sex work is a profession women choose voluntarily, a choice that therefore should be facilitated, I asked, how could this be? In a city whose university bears the motto, Son of Justice, enlighten us. The misconception that sex work is always a free choice masks a brutal reality of abuse, of trafficking. Government must act decisively, criminalizing those who exploit, supporting and, if possible, freeing victims, and of course, prioritizing enforcement against traffickers. Inspired by William Wilberforce's historic fight against slavery, we remain committed to ending modern slavery in all its forms. Our society's strength lies in protecting human dignity and justice. Ze vallen eruit. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
we
that's
can
okay.
hear you. Yeah.
Okay,
everything's
I'm
fine.
nearly. Thank you very much. It's just a short while. Inspired by William Wilberforce's historic fight against slavery, we remain committed to ending modern slavery in all its forms. Our society's strength lies in protecting human dignity and justice. We must continue to stand up for those whose voices are silenced, because true freedom means freedom for all, until all are free. Dear friends, when I was in Lviv, in the beautiful train station, there was an organ made out of Russian missiles that had been fired. It immediately brought me in mind the words of Isaiah 2, verse 4. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshare and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. We look forward to the day when justice, real justice, will reign against all the evilness we have seen in those days, and when all swords are beaten into plowshares. Let us remember that our work in politics is not just about law, not just about policies, but about people, about their dignity, about their freedom, about their hope, because we and they are all created in God's image. That core belief is the root of all our undertakings. As Christians called to serve, we are entrusted with the task to stand against injustice wherever it is hidden and to build a society where every person can live with dignity and peace. Together, let us commit to this mission, to be a voice for the voiceless, a shield for the vulnerable, and a beacon of hope for all, until all are free. May our work continue, and may God guide our steps. Thank you very much, and Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Becker, thank you very much. Thank you for your warm words. Thank you for visiting Ukraine. Thank you for your beautiful metaphor. I know it's a kind of a rush time for you because the election campaign is on the run and
It is.
you are quite busy. So we do understand if you will be limited with time. So let me address the question to you right away, because you have mentioned the importance of rule of law. And today we are talking about, resilience, sustainability, and capability of institutions, both Ukrainian and globally. Do you believe that international institutions do have the capability to protect the rule of law now? And if not, how we can, raise this capability?
They have to. Thank you very much for this question. And I do think this is one of the fruits of Christian values we had in Western Europe and also broader, also after World War II. When most of the nations thought this can't go on this way. Just brutally, the countries invading other countries to become more powerful, not thinking about the people and their dignity, but only thinking about power and not about justice. So it can be the most beautiful thing to bring justice when the people come together and give a recognition about how to live in human dignity and to acknowledge also the sovereignty of states and, more important, the rule of law. But we have seen in the last years, especially in Ukraine, when Russia brutally invaded Ukraine, I hoped for a United Nations mission to stop this. But we haven't seen it because Russia is one of the most important partners in the UN Security Council. And there has to be done much work to make this thing real working in the institutions to bring peace. So I do think it is, when we see in history, it is the best kind of thing we can do in the world to bring justice. But I also see that we now are in the sick circumstances that Russia is one of the vetoing, how do we say this? One of the countries who is ignoring international law. And I'm thinking about this because in these times, it is much too hard to say we have to build a peace now and very fast without giving Ukraine justice. There must be justice and not a peace without justice. That can be peace. So that's the difficult situation in which we are now. But in the end, over years and years, and this will take much of time, I also believe that the only thing what is the possibility to become in a real peaceful circumstances is to, from an enemy, become a friend. And now we can't imagine this. But I will pray for this. And maybe one time there will be a new moment when the people say, yes, it's time to sit around the table. But this is not the moment. You have the pain and all the cruelties. I've seen a little bit from it. And now we have to fight for real justice and real peace. And this is with justice. And also that criminals are brought to court, also here in The Hague, at International Court of Justice. That is the place where justice has to be done also to the Russian invaders that you are battling now. So sorry, it's a bit of a long answer, but I'm trying to reflect on the differences in this beautiful question.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, it is. It is an important question, and now I open, the floor to comments and reflections from our speakers and participants. Because thank you for mentioning the UN Security Council. It's not that Russia has been, an important actor in the council. It's still an important actor in the council for the fourth year. And each meeting, this is the representative of the country that says the open lie, in front of all participants. So again, we were talking about, we tackled upon the topic of capability, to respond to this, extreme challenges, because we do understand that we talk about, big, evil and nuclear power. And of course, it takes some, time and process, to respond to a numerous wake-up calls. That's another topic, what we do with the wake-up calls, because there were a number of those before the full-scale invasion to Ukraine. But still, the situation is as it is. It's not just about the Security Council. It's about MAGATE. the country that on the fourth year of the full-scale invasion is still largely financed by Russia, and the representatives who are responsible, for keeping international agreements in nuclear sphere are visiting the nuclear plant, occupied nuclear plant from the territory of Russia, and all this, beautiful pictures and handshakes and everything. It all raises a lot of questions, about justice. So let me, again, we all understand the complicity of the situation, but how much time we still need? Or where is this, place or moment when the situation can be changed, and how can be changed? And who is this important actor who can change the situation? Just a lot of questions put openly. If anybody wants to reflect, I highly invite to comments. We still have another questions: the balance between the resilience and sustainability and capability of institutions. I'll put it on the table as well, and I believe that you
Can I?
sure,
Okay.
sure. Please do.
Well, maybe first of all, a brief comment about the discussion we just had about the international organizations. And I fully agree with you that these organizations are in their core responsibility of maintaining peace and maintaining something like a rule of law on an international level. They are mostly dysfunctional because of this construction with Russia and China, as well as veto powers in the Security Council. You can mention many other examples. I'm not decided in my assessment if it is enough or if it is possible to reform, for example, the United Nations in a way that they are getting more functional in that regard, or if we need new institutional settings. This is an open question, I think, and trying to reflect on what we discussed previously about subsidiarity and about institutions. I think the driving factor in these reforms and the impulses for these reforms should not only come from governments and from states, but also from civil society actors, from other actors like churches, who also operate internationally, who could influence their governments, but who also can directly try to influence institutions and come up with ideas how these institutions should be reformed. But currently, they are not working. This is clear. But to give a little bit of optimism in this discussion, it is already great. Despite they are dysfunctional, we have them. And look at what the situation between countries in the world was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. At least we tried. And in some cases successfully. So let's not discredit the whole concept of international law and international institutions that try to enforce it because they are failing currently. So maybe there should also be some hope here when it comes to how mankind developed in this regard. Coming to the point we discussed before about working institutions at wartime, I think there is a misunderstanding here because I was talking about subsidiarity. Of course, we need, of course, institutions working at wartime. Clearly, I was talking about the conflict of interest between top-down and bottom-up in a wartime situation. And I agree that currently in Ukraine, my assessment would be we have too much top-down, more than is required just by the war effort. There needs to be more bottom-up in Ukraine. And this is the way This is, by the way, what surprised me very much when I saw how Ukraine is fighting that war and how Ukraine is mobilizing the whole society for fighting that war. Example is the procurement for weapons and other equipment for the army. From my German perspective, coming from a country that has not been in such a situation for decades, I was surprised to see how much equipment is paid and collected by civil society organizations. The whole notion that a civil society organization buys weapons and gives them to the army sounds strange to our ears from at first glance. The small one and the big ones. So the big ones like Pritulla or Come Back Alive, as well as like when I meet young Ukrainians, I often hear like, my father is at the front line and I'm collecting money for a night vision device. Can you help me? This sounds strange for Germans, but because procurement would be, of course, a state thing, and not done by private people or civil society institutions. But this is exactly what you meant when you were saying we need also the bottom-up approach at wartime. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. And I think this is what made Ukraine so extremely fast when it came to adapting to new ways of warfighting. The whole drone production, everything what we are admiring now in Europe and trying to copy, that like a whole ecosystem of small companies, small groups of people can fast adapt to the way the war is fought. This is something that makes Ukraine so successful, and what we are currently trying to copy. Despite it looks strange.
Yeah, there are cons and pros in this
Sure,
approach,
yeah.
and I believe that Pan Miroslav can, respond to this, because we were talking a lot about, Ukrainians and institutions, and all this legacy, that in which a strong institution, public institution, is a threat. So the legacy of public institutions has historically been under the question for a certain period of time. And that was actually one of the motivators that make people understand that their lives are in their hands, and made all these, movements from bottom up. I will probably surprise you, because I think that we do have a strong movement bottom up. But in a time of the war, it's not enough. People cannot buy enough weapons for their own money. Mm-hmm. The war needs strong, legitimate, functioning, and capable institutions. Otherwise, you cannot win the war. And I believe that you are lucky, that you don't expect that, people in Germany should not, fund with their own money the weapons, because that's the role of public institutions, to provide the security. Security is a basic function of the state and state institutions. Pane Miroslav, maybe you would want to add something to what we are discussing.
Я хотів би сказати кілька слів.
I would like to say several words about these two levels, the international one, and I will focus also on the Ukrainian one. When you speak about the international dimension, there is a very acute and challenging question that I would like to raise here. We say that international order has been basically destroyed by Russia, by authoritarian states. That is why my question is, can the institutions survive those which are built on this international order? That is the question that I have, and I can provide a very graphic example here. I think that could be a very good illustration that I would like to provide here, the Security Council. The Security Council is the institution which is aimed at taking care of peace, ensuring peace, assessing the situation worldwide, controlling the situation globally, and applying an effort to make sure that we keep this order in place. There is a member of the Security Council, a permanent member, which is responsible for open aggression, openly abusing and violating rule of law. And everything seems to be kind of functioning, kind of working, but as a matter of fact, it's just paralyzed. All of these activities, I am analyzing just for my own understanding. What would I do if I was there? It is my understanding that if we speak about honesty and truthfulness, for those people who respect rule of law, they need to say that let's not play these games. We will not be part of this theater. We are going to establish a different organization where we actually have rule of law functioning. However, the world is too scared to do this because there will be one moment when this structure, this institution will not be there, but there is no new institution to replace it, and you do not have a vision on how to build it. I think that this is what is very concerning for the world. That is why the world is sort of fine with the paralysis and dysfunction of this institution, just to have some. But it's important for us to address this matter. We cannot be like that because this new international order should lead to some restructuring of these international institutions. I cannot really think about the model format now, but there has to be a different structure, a different configuration that is about the international dimension, and now about the Ukrainian one.
There are some challenges in times of war. For example, as Ukraine is showing, institutions have failed because in times of war, there's a small group of people who take the decisions. And I'm not ready to blame them for doing that, for the fact that it is done by a small group of people. I'm not sure whether being in the shoes of the president of the country and needing to take urgent decisions, I would be asking the opinion of the whole country on what do you think about this or what do you think about that, because there's a military necessity. And that is why I, to some extent, understand why these institutions are, well, falling into issues right now. But we also have to think about the different perspective. It is the military, the war needs that tell us about the fact that the society has to be consolidated, not by one quasi authoritarian government. I don't really think that this is an authoritarian government, but there has to be a consensus of this society when it comes to certain matters. And this consensus should be built through institutions and by taking into account the opinion of the society. Thank you, Miroslav. I think that a part of this consensus is what we call the delegation of trust in times of war, when you understand that you need some quick decisions, and these quick decisions have to be taken by the institutions which have been shaped for that purpose, and we delegate our trust and their right to take these decisions. The other question is whether there is this trust, because when you understand that they can take decisions within the framework of their mandate. But I'm not sure whether we can speak here about the effectiveness of the decisions when the institution actually functions in accordance with the situation. We have many questions here because what we can see, we haven't even touched here the topic of the informational influences and their role. But even when it comes to the question of the legitimacy of institutions, the question is what we see and where we take the information from and who generates this information, whether this information is true, because the truthfulness is what we receive is an inevitable part of the decisions taken in times of war. But going back to the Security Council, we cannot avoid the topic of war. But you suggested a vision of the solution, that an institution is created because all good people should at some point say, I don't support the circus. They leave it and create a new institution. But establishment of an institution, even if we understand what are the principles it should be based on, requires a lot of resources. And that means we go back to the topic of capabilities, because it's the capability which starts from the courage to take decisions. And we have already talked about the how difficult it is to be brave and courageous in the situation we are in. But it also is about the money, which will support the capability of these institutions. For many years, we have been watching the debates about the 2% of GDP for the North Atlantic Alliance for security, or 1.5% or 3%. This has been happening for years. In times when drones are flying over the territory of the European Union. So again, I don't know whether it's a matter of courage, in fact. I would like to take a step back from politics right now, but I would like to illustrate the importance of courage and, loyalty to principles and what it may mean. As far as I know, the history of the church before Vatican II, the situation was as follows. The Catholic Church invited the Orthodox to be the observers during the council. And the Universal Patriarchate, Constantinople, communicated with the Moscow Patriarchate to organize a joint Orthodox delegation to the Vatican Council. Russia was against it. Moscow was against it. It didn't want to participate in this council at all. In the Vatican Council. And then came the moment when paralysis was in place. It seemed that there will be no Orthodox delegation there. And then Constantinople said, okay, we accept your reluctance to participate in the council, but we will have a delegation made up of those Orthodox who would like to go there. And they did that. So what did Moscow do? They sent their delegation. Why? Because when something important is taking place, Moscow cannot control it, cannot stop it, then they think it's better they take part in that. So let us not be afraid of courageous solutions and decisions. If the world can build a very important, a powerful system or some structure which would be effective, all those who initially say we don't want that, we will be against that, and so on, they will all want to participate. So I am for courage. Thank you for this story. Yes, you're welcome.
Case, the Orthodox Church is an example for the EU. So Istanbul being the coalition of the willing, moving towards the Second Vatican Council, and maybe the others will follow suit.
Так, дякую.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, our time is up. And Mrs. Becker had to disconnect, but we still have 1 or 2 minutes. So I would like to invite you to express your comments. Maybe someone from the audience would like to comment on that. But before that, I would like to ask one more question, which is connected with what Miroslav was talking about. You know, brave decisions can be taken more easily when you understand what they are based on and when you have the answer to the question why. And even better, when you understand how you are going to work with this brave decision in the long-term perspective, not just today, like getting up and saying, we're establishing a new institution. Well, for example. But our time is the time of new rapid challenges, which are amplified by technologies. For a whole year, we have been discussing artificial intelligence, if we may call it an intelligence, but well, this system of working with the data, which is radically changing all areas of life, which impact the managerial decisions and impact our interaction as people, which impact the decisions we take as people, including the political decisions. We all see how the decisions of the voters can be influenced, and that is the example of many countries. So my last question before the final remarks is, do you believe that in these turbulent times, we have to take the strategic decisions for a long term, for a long period, despite the fact that we have to respond to new challenges every day? Can we plan for the remote future, and what should be these strategic decisions which would enable us to take brave decisions today, well, even if they are very complicated? Thank you, and I would like to give you the possibility to express your final remarks. I'll be brief. Everything is based on values. Well, we have to realize it. If there is a crisis and we see that something doesn't work, let us look at the values, what does not work there, and let us build and develop what is working, what is capable of working. And therefore, at present, we need Konrad Adenauer, Robert Schuman, Alfred de Gasperi. We need people who understand the value, the importance of values in the political life, and who can, well, consolidate the community which will follow these values. We don't have any other solution. We need a center, a new center, because the old centers don't work somehow. Where is the center? Where is the center, Miroslav? All right, thank you very much.
exactly connect to what you just said, because you were asking how can we do long-term decisions at the current time of war. Yes. Translate you correctly. And Robert Schuman, Konrad Adenauer, and Alcide de Gasperi were in the same situation, because at the time when they were laying the foundations for the EU, one could also have said, oh, do we really have to deal with this now? We have other current pressing issues to solve. Europe was still economically in a very bad situation. People were poor. The post-war period was not easy. Europe was divided. Many people considered the decision in favor of European integration, especially in Germany, as something that contradicts the unity of the country, because it makes us part of the Western camp and it maintains the confrontation between the West and the East. But they took this decision. And maybe this is something that could also encourage Ukraine now to do the same. Of course, it's because it's dangerous to say just let's focus on the current pressing issues. So people can easily exploit this to do things that will make it very difficult for Ukraine in the future to go the way it wants to go towards Europe. So my answer would be yes, but I know it's not easy, and a partnership might be the best way to keep this going and to do this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Your example and actually the foundations of establishing and development the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, its legacy now, it's a very bright example of a good strategic decisions in a tough time. So thank you very much. Thank you for this conversation, Mr. Beringer, Pane Marinovich.
Father Roman, I'm sorry we have taken a little bit more time than we planned, but this was a very interesting discussion. I would like to thank all the participants, all the organizers. Thank you, Oksana, for moderating this panel. And before I invite you to continue our discussion in the atrium of our faculty, I would like to stress that this is just the first day of our 18th Ecumenical Social Week. We haven't had many discussions yet. We are just warming up. And I think that in the next days, we will have more reflections, more questions. Tomorrow, we will start our physical meeting at the National University of Lviv Polytechnic at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I invite everyone. The bus will be leaving from here, from the building of the theological faculty. And thank you for such an interesting beginning of this week. I would like to thank all the panelists and all the attendees, everyone who was participating in the discussion and will be participating in the discussion. And I invite everyone to take a joint picture.